Sports fans, get ready for Sportz-USA. Get sports from a personal point of view from seasoned professionals who've reported and lived the stories. Now let's go to the crew high atop the Sportz-USA press box. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Sportz-USA. That's sports with a Z-USA.com. Glad you're with us today. Boy, we have got a bunch of stuff to cover. I don't know if we can cram it in all in 60 minutes, but let's just get started right away with Bo Carter, who's with us. He's the executive director of the National Collegiate Baseball Writers Association, former assistant commissioner for media relations for the Southwest Conference and the big whatever it is now, the Big 12. So you're really following the college baseball closely. Let's talk about the regionals and the teams that have advanced into the super regionals. Bo, there's a lot of SEC teams in the super regionals, but when you look at how many that they had in, which was they lost half their field. I mean, they end up with 4 or 5 in the College World Series. But how do you think overall they did? I mean, there was some embarrassing loss. What's your take?
Yeah, just look at this, Little Rock versus Troy. I think that says it all right.
Well, we were just talking. That was very embarrassing for Florida. Texas A&M laid an egg. And, you know, when you start out with 12 picks and you get 6 eliminated, I have nothing against the SEC personally, but I know what they're doing. And it was the same in football and the same really in basketball. And now it's gone to baseball where are they really deserving that many picks is the question.
Makes you wonder sometimes because, they're they've got teams, like 14 teams in the top 60 or 7 in the ratings percentage indexes, which is what the NCAA committee uses quite a bit. So hard to disseminate it, but they got, 7 or 8 home sites too. So
yeah,
they pretty much laid it out there for them, and they still couldn't hold serve.
That's what their plan is. You know, I've talked about it before. They don't want to compete against anybody that's not spending as much money as they are. But, you know, spending money doesn't always make team chemistry, and it doesn't always add up to wins.
Yankees and Dodgers.
You're right. You're right. I mean, they're going to buy a pennant.
And these teams that are complaining about Texas Tech spending all the money.
That's right.
Yeah, it's really,
they say Tech shouldn't be spending all that money. They're buying their way to a championship or whatever.
Well, there was a real good article that I read, and when you think about it, and let's take the UCLA Texas Tech softball series. UCLA has played softball. It's been a West Coast sport forever, and they've dominated because of that. But there really wasn't much competition, and now other teams across the country have upgraded their programs, and they don't like that. And, you know, I guess if I was a UCLA fan, I wouldn't like it either. But I think some of the, quote, blue bloods in all of these sports are going to have to come to the realization that college athletics has really changed underneath their feet.
Really, and one of the fun stories at Texas Tech sidelight is Jason Williams and his daughter Mia Williams, who transferred from Florida to Texas Tech. Williams got in fights with Florida fans during the the Gainesville originally. And
he went on Joe Rogan, and he's a legend in basketball in Gainesville. And he went on Joe Rogan and denounced Florida forever.
He said,
because of the way he was treated in the stands. That's crazy.
He said he won't set foot on the campus again unless his daughter is playing softball. That's the only time he said he'll go back.
Well, let's talk about baseball a little bit more. 3 of the top 8 seeds were eliminated. UCLA, Georgia Tech by OU coach, and Florida.
Hey, excited about that.
Yeah, and so the matchups going into this weekend, as we alluded to, West Virginia's hosting a super regional against Cal Poly. The Florida Regional, no more, and Troy gets to host against Little Rock. I know ESPN is really jumping through hoops to do that series. Southern Cal, who beat the Aggies, is at North Carolina. Who is Auburn hosting, Bo? Who's you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just
who is that?
Ole
Is
Miss.
Ole Miss.
Is that Ole Miss?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ole Miss. A&M or USC has. They were talking about. I think they're going to go right from there and not fly back.
Yeah,
to Los
not
Angeles.
even go
class,
home.
So.
That would make sense. OU is at Kansas. St. John's is at Alabama. Oregon is at Texas, and Mississippi State is at Georgia. That'll be a stem winder, Bo. I know where your loyalty lies. Go Dogs, right?
Hey, that guarantees that a team named the Bulldogs will be in Omaha.
That's right. Right.
So now they're two. Really, that's and you've got two tops, like you talked about, the Oregon, Texas, and Mississippi State. Georgia got 4 of the top 7 teams competing in the 2 regionals, which it's always going to happen often, but it's really it's just a really good field, and you always like to see the St. John's and the last year Murray State and a few new teams. The Omaha people really, if y'all remember, adopt them sort of as their underdog favorites. So they feed them extra food at Casio's. John, you remember that? So it's
speaking of the World Series, Michael Redding, my son, is with us, and we wanted to talk about the College World Series coming up and some of the legendary stories. And Michael's got a legendary story when he visited. We couldn't decide what year that was. Do you remember, Michael? Was it 2005, 2006? Had you already graduated?
I think it was either 05 or 06.
so.
It might have been 07.
Right.
Sometime in there.
You didn't have your driver's license.
One of those, Texas, ASU, Florida.
Yeah, you didn't have your
No,
driver's
it might have been
license
2004, 2005.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
it was that range of that early 2000s.
I was the executive director of the College Baseball Foundation, and we went up, for the World Series, and of course, being a new organization, we didn't have any money to spend on a digital, person. So we brought on Michael to handle all of our digital stuff online materials. So the legendary story we start with Michael is he could be one of the only guys ever thrown out of the press box at Omaha. Now this is at not the old press box, but it was still at Rosenblatt with the new one that they built, that is sort of perched over the stands. And I had Michael with his laptop next to me up in the press box next to Bo, and I go to the restroom, take a break, okay? And I met Kevin Costner in there, and that's another story. But when I come back, Michael is standing up, grabbing his laptop, going, "You can't have it, you can't have it." And J.D. Hamilton was telling me, and Bo, you were just standing there laughing,
trying to figure out what was going on.
And what had happened is that was back in the days of the CBS Sports line, and Michael was putting up the scores for us, and he was getting the scores up faster than CBS. Right. And CBS called JD and said, "Who's that guy? Get him. He can't do that. He can't beat us." So you can have it from there, Michael. Oh my!
Well, I think the thing that's so funny about that though is if you think about it, that was right before the start of social media, where everybody's sitting in the stands on their own, right? And there's like that little time window where CBS and ESPN, they had the technology in the stadium, but nobody else did, and they had their little monopoly, right? And now that ship sailed. There's no universe where anything like that could ever be kept down. And what's funny is if you look at the contracts and all the agreements you signed to get in the press box, there was nothing about digital rights. That was the thing that everybody, that was sort of the afterthought, right? And now if you think about it, almost everybody's actually watching the World Series, or following it through, the ESPN, live play app or the CBS app or, any of the, or they're on The Athletic or, any of these sports sites, nobody's actually watching it on, well, I guess it wouldn't be linear television, but on cable anymore, and so there's this little time window where I think, we were right at that cusp of, being right on the edge of, digital
we
forward,
were trendsetters.
and then, you got these legacy folks.
Yeah. Hadn't even
you got
thought
these
about
legacy folks that are, just trying to tiptoe into the water. Yeah. And I don't know. It's interesting because it's like, that's like, if you think about it in that mid 2000s, right? Now I think you see a lot more of these, Cinderella stories than you did then, because I think that the year you're talking about, I think it was, Arizona State, I think it was Cal State Fullerton. I think it was LSU. I think Texas was there. It's like, 7 of your 8 teams are, this is their, 19th, 20th, 30th time there.
Think
so
of
there's
that
not
field.
really
That
a lot
was
to cover. And I think CBS just...
that was Augie Garrido and Skip Burtman and Jim Brock, at Arizona State.
Mm-hmm. Died of cancer right after the World Series. Was
lots and lots of legends in that time period for sure.
Yeah, and that's what's just so interesting about it, because if you think about it,
now
with the World Series, there's so much coverage. You got the games obviously, but then you're struggling to fill all programming because there's no other college sports happening, right?
Right.
You've got outside of college, you've got, the NBA and you got baseball and, but now you've got tons and tons of outlets that are all trying to find an angle, all trying to find a story, all trying to find something, to fill the time period. And so I just laugh, because CBS is sitting there, trying to shut down, and it's like,
a teenager with a laptop.
There's nothing else happening, right?
Well,
but there's nothing else. There's nothing else happening, on the sports calendar.
I think one of the things that was happening was that was the first time that people were actually following things on their phone in the stands, and CBS saw that and they said, "Hey, no way, we don't want to distract from our website that we've paid all this money to do." And so anyway, Bo and I straightened it out, and Michael was able to stay in the press box.
But if you think about it, right, that period of time, that's before the iPhone, people, might have, their Blackberries, sitting there, but, there was none of this, second screen. There was none of this, pulling up the, while you're sitting in the stands watching, pulling up, the live play-by-play or any of that. So it's like, it was just that, like, it was like that perfect moment of time where you had the technology to do live updates, but you didn't have the people sitting there, wanting it. I don't know. It's just a really interesting, there's like about that 5-year period, where you can't really, now, you look down, you're in the press box or you're at, you're in Omaha and you're looking across the stadiums and, every other person's on their phone, or they've got, their headphones in listening to a play-by-play because it's all, you got the internet all right there. But, that back then you didn't. That was, it was that perfect window.
That's, we could be a real footnote in the history of the College World Series. So, Tom, what year did you go up?
2014, 2017, 19.
Yeah, he's talking about Texas Tech's trip. They went 4 times,
and then I also went with A&M up there. So I've been 4 times up there, and of course this wasn't ever at Rosenblatt. This was always at the new TD Ameritrade ballpark. But loved it, just absolutely loved it. What I love most, and you alluded to it earlier, John, was when these minor teams come in, they treat them so well.
Yes.
All the fans are so knowledgeable up in Omaha. Yes, they all have their team. Some make pilgrimages there every year, whether their team is there or not.
Right.
And they wear their team gear, but they are so supportive and they're good, knowledgeable baseball fans. I have not had a bad experience in Omaha, have totally loved it every single time. And quite honestly, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest spectacles in
It's
sport.
Americana, definitely.
It really is. It's 100% pure baseball, and I love it.
The whole city, and it's not just in and around the stadium, it's the whole city. It's, any bar you walk into, any restaurant you walk into, people can just tell if you're there for the World Series, and everybody, no matter where you are, they just always pull out all the stops, for everybody.
Absolutely. I went a couple of years ago when A&M made it all the way to the finals. I went up there with my dad. And at first I thought it was going to be kind of hard with an 80-year-old up there, but it was wonderful. And it was raining one time before one of the games that A&M was going to play, and we wound up going over to the mat, the bar, grill, whatever. The line was way out of the.
And where you were going, it was probably down by the downtown warehouse district.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is a great segue from you and Michael. Bo, we've got to talk about Mr. C's before your internet goes out again. Let me just, I don't know if any of you other people will know anything about Mr. C's, but it was a restaurant that was a landmark in Omaha. It was up on North 30th Street in North Omaha. They were in business for 55 years. And let's see if we can remember the story of how the University of Texas got there, that started this whole tradition. Were they in a rain delay?
No.
They had a real late game.
Yeah,
And this was when Cliff Gustafson was still coaching. They didn't have any place to go eat after the ball game. And they found that, they called this restaurant Mr. C's, and he said that he would accommodate them and he'd wait on the team. And so after that became a tradition. Every year that Texas or Texans were up at the World Series, they would go to Mr. C's. And Michael, tell everybody your memories of that place. It's indescribable. I'll put up pictures of it. On one wall, he had a recreation of an Italian villa and a seaside resort. And it was incredible.
Yeah, you walk in and you're not entirely sure if you're in a theme park or if you're in, an Italian restaurant.
Right.
He's got, he's wandering around the tables, and when I was up there, it was, late 2000s. So he was probably in his 80s at this point, and he's just wandering around the tables and, he's making sure he greets every single person. He's singing,
he would come in and you'd hear this.
He sings, he's pulling out all the stops. and he's just, he's the nicest man. He's just this old Italian American guy. On the wall, he's got this mural. He had, a cardboard cutout of, Pope John Paul II, and then after, Pope Benedict came in, then he added a little cutout of Pope Benedict. And I was actually thinking about this last year, when the new Pope Leo was, picked. I was like, man, if only Mr. C was around to see this. You think, a Pope from Chicago wouldn't have, a giant cardboard cutout wearing a White Sox hat, sitting in his, at the front of the restaurant greeting everybody coming in, and he's, it's indescribable, and it was, it was Omaha, so everything's steaks. It's an Italian restaurant.
It was a steakhouse. It was a steakhouse.
Pasta. It's
he's got spaghetti. Michael hit it on the head. They also had a big wedding venue in the back with these Roman columns. You guys remember that? With all the,
had statues. Roman,
a brook running through it with all the fake trees. The saddest thing, I talked to our friend Howard Boarding, said the whole thing's boarded up. They never.
He retired, I believe, in 2007, and they held in Omaha. They had a Mr. C and Mary Caniglia Day. That was his last name. I don't know what his first name was. It was just Mr. C. And so, I'm sure he's passed away many, many years now. But we need to get Kirk Bowles and Brian Davis and some of those guys that we would meet up there.
Bill Schoening.
It was a tradition. You didn't go to Omaha without going to Mr. C's.
Well, and
you were talking, Bo, about how everybody's so nice and all knowledgeable. I mean, my dad and I were there for the Aggies that year, and we couldn't find a table because it was so crowded. Well, these people had a table, and they were for one of the other schools. They let us sit there, we just shared stories and talked about baseball, and it was a wonderful evening. It wasn't, we're going to kill you, and this is going to be, it was a wonderful, wonderful day. We had a great time. almost better than being at the ballpark, almost.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you think about some of these schools, in other sports, some of these rivalries, right? But, and some of it's still there, right? When LSU makes it in, it's a little bit more prickly than, otherwise. But if you think about it, there are some of these schools that, if they meet in any other sport at any other spot, they're going to be these huge rivals. There's going to be a bunch of, back and forth. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't really happen there. Everybody's just kind of, it's more of a party for everybody. And obviously there'll be a winner and there'll be the finals, but anybody that gets there, it's just a party for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Now LSU does win the Jello shot contest at that other restaurant.
Yeah. Now, what nowadays, Bo? What are the restaurants to go to? I remember there was a great one out there in the Stockyards district.
Johnny's. We used to go there with Warren.
Johnny's. That's right.
Johnny's Italian Steakhouse
still
is
open.
incredible.
Still open.
Yeah. I go there every time I go to Omaha.
It looks
were
like
there.
a mafia place.
This is back, when all the skullduggery about the conference breakups was going on. Don't you remember, Bo? We walked into Johnny's and a bunch of the ADs, the future Big 12 schools, were meeting there. And when they saw us, they turned pale white because this was a secret powwow that was going on in the back room of Johnny's. And, now in 2005, what was going on there? They were shocked to see us because something was going on that they were planning then. I can't remember what happened in 2005.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. No tell. The other thing that you referenced to, John, is 83 Texas, Alabama. Get Roger Clemens, Schiraldi and Clemens, and Schiraldi beat Alabama, and I think they sat around the ballpark for like 2 hours and everything had closed. And then they called Mr. C, said he actually left he was in bed. I think he got up and went down there and cooked for
opened the restaurant back
up.
They
gave him, remember they had that basement that was really quite a, no telling what kind of stories could be told. Probably
we'll talk about Mr. C's on several of these episodes because it was so memorable. We're going to get everybody on the record. And Kevin, you can just guess if you don't know anything about these teams. Because we're going to come to you for basketball here soon. All right. West Virginia is hosting Cal Poly. Who's going to win that one, guys? West Virginia?
West Virginia.
I would think
I'm going to
home field advantage.
go with that one.
Home field advantage.
Little Rock and Troy. I have no idea who's going to win that.
I think Troy's going to do it.
Troy's the home team.
The Trojans.
Yeah, the
It's gotta be
Trojans versus the Trojans. Yeah, it is the Trojans.
Troy played really strong.
It's too bad Troy's not playing South Carolina again like they did in football that time, and they had that giant sign in the football stand saying, your Trojans can't cover our cocks. So, anyway. All right, Chapel Hill, Southern Cal is against North Carolina. I think I'm going to go with the Tar Heels.
I'm going to go with the Tar Heels, too. I think they've looked too strong. A&M didn't put up any type of a fight against USC, and I've not been that impressed with USC all year for the reasons you alluded to earlier. There's not a lot of teams out west. Yes, they play in the Big Ten, but in baseball, it's like being the world's tallest midget.
USC and Oregon are two teams that they've got.
But they're West Coast teams. They're not traditional.
They're not Big Ten teams. Yeah. Just like Texas is not an SEC team. We won't even get into that. They're a Big 12 team. All right, what about Auburn hosting Ole Miss?
I think that's a strong series. I think that's going to be an interesting one. Yeah. Auburn has surprised me this year. They've really put together things. Bo, tell me what your thoughts are on their pitching staff because they seem to be putting things together pretty well.
They're about 3 deep. They've got that Marciano guy and then a couple of – they've got the Sanders kid is like a real great closer for them. They really might. In fact, I think they beat Mississippi State 2 out of 3, but they think they swept like 6 series, won 8 of their last 10 SEC
they got
series.
Hot,
so they're on
hot
the roll
at the end of the year.
They did.
All right, let's go to another real rough series. Georgia hosting your Bulldogs from Mississippi State, Bo. What do you think?
Could be interesting. What they keep talking about, Georgia hitting the ball in the trees. Remember, they've got all those trees around Foley Field.
Right.
And Georgia's got that great Daniel Jackson, who's like one of the top 3 or 4 contenders.
Is that the catcher?
Dick Hauser.
He's unbelievable. I mean, he's hitting home runs every game.
I think he's driven in 92 runs. He's batting 390. This guy's,
Yeah, he's had major league numbers in a college season.
John, you remember Mark Teixeira the year he had at Georgia Tech? This kid's had a year like that
Yeah.
too. So it's really,
speaking of Georgia Tech, man, they got beat out in their regional by Oklahoma. Coach, what do you think? What you think?
I'll ride with Oklahoma on this one. I mean, the fact in looking at that, what a finish. 10 innings, leadoff batter, Dockery in the 10th inning. I mean, he just doesn't hit one. He hits one stratospheric 450 plus dead center. And it's fun to watch because, I mean, I've never been a real big fan of it, but the minute he hits it, he just stands there and watches it.
Well, I think the reason he was standing there and watching it because he was still in pain from the previous pitch that hit him in the solar plexus.
Yeah, I'm going to ride with Oklahoma. They're playing really good ball right now. I mean, I looked at their pitching; it's gotten a little better. They've got a couple of kids back, and it might be a good time. I don't know that they'll go beyond,
right?
But for this, I'm excited for them.
What about Oregon and the University of Texas? Michael, you got any feelings there?
That's gonna be a hard one. It'll probably be Texas just because it's the Austin regional, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's, come down to the 7th, 8th, 9th inning in a game 3, one way or the other.
Schlossnagle has a great track record in super regionals.
Right.
He's done really, really well. I have not been overly impressed with the Longhorns this year as compared to previous Longhorn years, but they have put it together here at the end of the year. I mean, you have to hand it to them. They took care of business in the regional and are, getting through the SEC and in the regional. So hats off to them. I think they're going to do well.
Yeah, they're either going to be on a hot streak, and it'll be basically over by the 5th inning in the second game, or it'll be, a knockdown, drag out fight one way or the other.
Bo, don't they have some problems in their bullpen?
I think so. They kind of do by committee, where they get one kid that's like 6-0 in the middle. When he comes in, they score some runs magically. But they've given up some leads, and trying to think of the SEC tournament they had. Some of their weaknesses were exposed, so it might not.
Yeah, they went out pretty early in that tournament.
And Oregon's got a great pitching staff, like Michael talked about. I think they've got a chance.
Yeah, it's hard to know what they've got. I mean, you really don't hear a lot about them during the year, but and I guess everybody will probably go with Alabama over St. John's.
I think so. The Tide has been pretty strong throughout the year. Although I will say, just for being a naysayer here, St. John's, they put an incredible run up in that regional tournament. They did not back down. They played strong.
Yeah, the one game that I caught in that, it's a football score, and I'm like, man, okay.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. They had some good extra points.
Yeah.
So,
one last note on the Longhorns, Tom. I think it's just becoming more, apparent by the day that the Aggies just were so emotional about Schlossnagle leaving and going to Austin that they made a knee-jerk decision to hire early. And I just, I read today that they want to completely flush his whole coaching staff. If they're going to do that, why don't you just go ahead and make a change and get a new coach in there and get a different direction? Because I don't think that he's going to go anywhere.
Well, I think he did it with Band-Aids this year. I mean, every team has their share of injuries, but I will tell you, the Aggies had more injuries this year. They had 4 or 5 pitchers that were out for the whole year. And that's an excuse any team can give it. But you're right. They were emotionally spent when Schloss did what he did. But they can say scoreboard this year. They swept the Horns.
Well, so what we're looking at is a College World Series of West Virginia, Troy, North Carolina, Auburn, OU, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia. Now that's going to give the SEC 5 teams in there.
I think.
And if that happens, I mean, you put 12 in, you ought to get 5 at the end.
Right.
So
a little redemption.
Yeah, I would say so.
I'll say this too.
Yeah, go ahead, Bo.
No, I was going to say Skip Johnson. Coach knows Skip, or y'all met him. one of the best tacticians and the Oklahoma coach. He was at Navarro College for about 15 years. He coached the famous Coppell Copperheads of the Texas Collegiate League. So he's
what happened to him at Texas? Why didn't that
I
work
don't
out?
know. He was pitching coach there, and I don't know whether they just want. He's kind of he's like he and Tim Tadlock, Coach Tim Tadlock and Coach Johnson grew up together in Denton, and they're just kind of like, hey, we're good old country boys. We're just enjoying. North Texas doesn't have baseball, but we had a good time. We had a great time playing high school ball in Denton, and they. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't sophisticated, but that guy's one great baseball coach.
Let's talk about softball. Amazing series, and I can't think of any series where there were two teams that were down to their, elimination game and then swept a doubleheader. That's incredibly difficult, and so we end up with the two teams that we predicted would be there last year in a rematch, Texas Tech and Texas. Now, I'd have to say that scouting these teams, Texas probably has the best player and they probably have the best pitcher, but I think Texas Tech has got the best 1 through 8. So I don't know how that's all going to come out. I think obviously that Cavan, when she's on, she's almost unbeatable. And
she is. She's strong. I agree with you. I was telling my wife this morning that Tegan Cavan has really impressed me in this tournament. She's been really strong. But to your point, John, I would even go so far as to say Tech has 1 through 10.
Yep.
They are deep. They are very deep. Every player in their lineup and some on their bench can come and can make some noise offensively.
Yeah, they've got more players that hits homers than anybody, I think, in the country. 1 through 10, 1 through 9.
And they're good base runners.
Yes.
They're really good base runners.
And then they've got a table setter, Maya Davis. Yeah. I mean,
she
she's
can really run.
leading the nation in hits, right now, career hits. And so
they've really got an amazing team. Tay Panel has done really well.
Mia Williams playing lights out.
Mia Williams is playing lights out. They really all are. And the most intriguing thing, and we talked about it last week when most of y'all weren't here, but Coach K and I talked about it along with Lee when he was with us, was the way that Coach Glasgow knows the rule book. Probably more so than any other
rotating those
coach.
Players in, yeah.
And I mean, the fact that he can just switch in Nyjah or Caitlin Terry, and they pretty much have 2 starting pitchers that play half the game. If there's a left-handed batter, he'll put Caitlin Terry in. Then he'll put her in left field and put Nyjah in to pitch to the right-hander. I mean, it's
he needs to recruit an ambidextrous pitcher that can go left and right,
But he knows the rule book and he uses it to its full advantage. And almost every game it worked for him. The thing that struck me odd for Tech was the last 3 games before this game where they won 2-0 against Bama. But the 3 games prior, they had 2 to 3 run leads going in the 7th inning
and gave them up.
And they gave up those leads and then won in extra innings, except the one game they dropped to Tennessee. But truly remarkable that they were able to overcome giving up the lead that late. It was really remarkable that they stayed with it. So I was really pleased with what I've seen with them. I think it's going to be a wonderful series, just like it was last year.
Coach, I think the Oklahoma fans, though, are still stunned that the Sooners aren't in there.
It's a shocker. And again,
what's your take on what happened to them?
No pitching. They just didn't have somebody that they could put out on the mound and have faith in to carry them through and give them a chance to be successful. We said it over and over again, and I'll be to my dying day. Pitching wins baseball games. And if you look at the ones either be going into the super regionals or you go into this World Series with the Tech and Texas playing each other, it's going to come down to pitching. And again, I lean toward, again, Tech, because I think they have 2 of the most outstanding young women throwing out of the circle. Yeah. They just go out there, if you didn't if you didn't wear an arm out, I can't remember how many pitches Canada threw, but it got into almost the absurd. And she was just as strong at the end as she was at the beginning.
Well, that's one of the things that, Cavan has been unhittable, but I think she may be getting into the same situation that Nyjah Kennedy did last year. She's thrown, now UT had a pitcher that really helped them out in the first game against Tennessee. And so that gave her a little breathing room, but I think she's getting to the point where they pitch her in every game, and if she has to pitch 3 games in a row, I don't know, it could be a reverse of what happened last year when Kennedy ran out of gas.
I think you see it with us, the depth. Right now, I agree with what you guys were saying earlier about the depth. I mean, it is kind of strange when I was watching the game and they made the comment 8 of the 9 starters transferred in from someplace else. Good job recruiting. I mean, right. I agree with Bo. It's a money thing. I mean, all through college athletics right now, it's a money thing. It's and you're going to see
not
that.
a Texas Tech thing. It's a college thing.
It's a college. It's all over the place.
And no, it's not. It's not Tech. It's everybody. Like we said last week, it's the Wild West. Show me the money. I mean, you look at
the hypocrisy is how they talk about Tech, and they're all doing it.
Yeah.
Oh,
and they've all been doing it forever.
And
they're not in the top 10.
Hardly even in the top 10
when
you look at the money spent across the board. But it still doesn't matter. They get branded the bad guy, and I really, quite honestly, I'm sick of it.
And really, and what was also hypocritical is Tech was seeded 11th.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Now you tell me there's, maybe there's 2 or 3 teams better than they are, but there's not 10 teams better than they are, and that's that SEC joke. I mean, they get all the prime spots because they spend the most money, and that's what people are getting tired of. It's not.
I think people are getting really sick of it.
Yeah, it's this country club that Tech's, breaking into, and they don't like it.
Right.
Sounds like Mrs. Thurston Howell III there on Gilligan's Island, So, so do we have picks? I'm going to go. Weeks ago, I said I'll ride Tech. I know that Lee picked Tech last week. What about you, Michael? You're a Horns guy?
Man, this is a hard one because, if you look at last year's World Series and this year's World Series, I think I gotta go with Texas just because of, with it being the rematch, with it being sort of all the stars are aligning, right? But man, Tech's team is just a lot deeper. Texas is a little bit below where they were last year, right? And Tech is above where they were last year. But, I don't know. There's something about it. There's something about the rematch. There's something about, going for a back-to-back title. If Texas wins, it'd actually only be the second title in their program history in softball, which for as successful as that program's been over the years is kind of surprising. I don't know. I think it'll be Texas, but I think it'll be in 3, and I think it'll be close.
What about you, Kevin? You have anybody that you want to pick? All right, go with the Horns. How about you, Bo?
I'll say this. We got to pick the All-America team tonight, John. You know how that goes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Tech, it's always kind of when you lose the year before, you get a little bit of chip on the shoulder. A quick note, too, Tegan Cavan is from Caitlin Clark's hometown, Des Moines, Iowa. Must be something in the water over there. They're producing super girls there or whatever. But no, I think Tech's.
Yeah. How about you, Tom?
Well, my heart says Texas Tech, obviously, but I kind of agree with Michael. There's something, that aura, that magic around the University of Texas that they just seem to find a way, a will to win. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a big Horn supporter, and I said, the difference between the two programs, and this is not just true in softball, but it's true in all sports. Texas believes they will win. Even if it's the 7th inning and they're down by 3 runs, they believe they'll win. Tech is hoping they'll win. And there's a big difference. And that's true, I think, in all of the sports. Now, I really want Tech to win. Tech could use a shot in the arm from a national championship. They keep getting right to the cup and not winning. I'm thinking about basketball a few years ago when they lost to Virginia in a heartbreaker in overtime. Getting skunked in the playoffs by Oregon this year in football. They're getting really close, but they're not pushing it over the edge. It would do wonders for the the whole school if they could win.
Well,
But I
I
really
would,
think
you know what I would say to your
But
friend?
you got to start somewhere.
That's
do.
right. You know what I would say to your friend? I agree with you up until last year. This is a new age. And all the blue blood stuff, that's out the window. And, Oklahoma has got that tradition forever and ever in football, but they're having to deal with this new reality as well, Coach.
Yeah, it's a whole new game out there. Like I said, the game itself has changed. Everything behind the game has changed radically. And if you don't have, all the schools now are going to basically a general manager
Yes.
to take care of all the little things that they have to deal with right now to be competitive. And again, some of them, like Clemson, has been real reluctant to get on board with getting the nil and some of the other things. And it's costing them. It's costing them across the board.
Right.
Great program. You talk about blue bloods, but they're still struggling because they haven't kept up with the Joneses as far as not just the money, the technology, the management of the sports itself. It's
Right.
become a corporate activity.
Yes.
And they need a general manager, a CEO, not just an athletic director. Athletic directors have their spot, but they have to have somebody managing the business end of the sports right now, and it's completely changed. And thank goodness they have.
You
And you
know,
mark my words, if Tech does win or doesn't win, I'm sorry, if Tech doesn't win, the first thing you're going to hear is, you see, you can't buy championships. That's what the media overall line is going to be. And that it's just,
But they're all doing it.
they're all doing it. They've done it for several years now.
Michael, who was
But,
it? The Lost
and the other
Dots?
side of that, right? Is it? Yeah.
The Lost Dots said,
Yeah,
"We are
I
the
was just going to say,
Joneses."
on the other, right? And but you just look at that, right? You look at, even, that was true 10 years ago. That was true 20 years ago. That was true 50 years ago, right? It's not true now, and I think for softball and for the NCAA, it is probably better if Tech wins, because I think it'll finally show, right now, I think even with everything you're seeing in the NIL and everything, you're still seeing this, you've got sort of this old guard of folks that are saying, you can't buy your way in,
Right.
And the first little chink of that armor, right, was Indiana, winning the national title this year. That was the
Exactly.
first little chink of like, well, maybe you can,
Yep.
right? And I think, as much as it would pain me to see, Texas lose, I think the sooner it's probably better for everybody, the sooner everybody gets on board with the new way of doing things, because
Right.
then it'll reach a new equilibrium. But I think as long as you're in this sort of weird, half in, half out, you're
Right.
gonna have your Clemsons that are say, nope, we're not gonna do it, and the whole sport will suffer.
Well,
I
I know,
agree
Tom-
with you,
suffer.
Michael.
Tom,
I agree completely.
One of the notes that I'm looking at now, and what a perfect time for Tech to really build its program, because there was a survey that came out. 82% of the college softball audience now is under the age of 34. So what that means is more girls are playing softball and more girls are watching softball. And so I think this World Series will be great for both Texas and Texas Tech, no matter who wins, because they'll be creating a new old guard, if you will, right before your eyes. And so it'll be really interesting. I'm going to have to go with the team that I started with. And it wasn't just school loyalty. I just thought that with the addition of all the kids that they brought in this year, they have to be better than what they were last year.
I agree. They're good.
And if you think about it, it's good for the sport. I think that it's this rematch too. Just look at how Caitlin Clark and Iowa, and that rivalry that they had with LSU, and that
Right.
more than anything else brought people to women's basketball at the college level. And then after she graduated, and the WNBA viewership is up. And, if I think you'll see a very similar thing. I hope it's a great series. I hope it goes to 3 games. I think having that rivalry of it, be in the rematch, that's going to be the thing that I think will help make it sustainable. year after year, and not just, that's the 26, and then we go back to, not really paying attention to it.
Well, what's really going to happen is that for the first time ever, it's sort of going to be sustainable because there's going to be a pro softball league now, and these stars are going to go,
right?
These seniors are going to go there, and it's going to be sort of like the Caitlin Clark effect for this softball league. And one segue, Coach, you were talking about managing the program. As I mentioned, Texas Tech is on the cover of Texas Football Magazine. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's called the Bible of Texas football in this state. But on the cover is not necessarily players and Coach McGuire. Coach McGuire is on the cover, but also Cody Campbell, James Blanchard, and Kirby Hocutt. That's the general manager of the football team. And the athletic director, as well as the head of the Board of Regents and the guy that's single-handedly trying to, get college athletics straightened out with the Save College Administration Act. So it's very interesting that the corporation, as they call it, is on the cover and not just one player.
I agree that it's an intriguing opportunity for Texas Tech to show off kind of the whole structure of how they're putting this together. It's almost like a roadmap for other teams that have big donors like Cody Campbell to start trying to build their teams up like this. I think you're going to see more of it throughout. Like you alluded to Indiana, that didn't happen just like that, even though they came out of nowhere in the last 2 years to win rapidly. But that took some money. That took getting some players there, getting the talent there. I think you're going to see that across the board in other sports.
I'm more interested in the Sorsby situation at Tech.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll go to that.
It's an interesting deal to me because I have no idea why Sorsby's attorneys are trying to make a case for him. They got the guy dead to rights for betting on 40 Indiana football games when he was on the team. Now, they make a quick note there that he didn't bet against his team and he didn't play in any of the games, as if that somehow or another justifies it as okay. But where do they think they've got a case to win that when he's bet on 40 games that his team played in?
Well, they found out that he bet up to $90,000 during his career at Indiana and Cincinnati, and he's been betting since he's been over at Tech.
Yeah, he's been hiding it by using.
Well,
yeah.
I do like how his defense boils down to, well, I bet on Indiana, but they went 4-8 that year, so I lost all those bets. So it's fine.
Well, we'll probably be behind this story when you watch this episode, because the attorneys, took their cases to court in Lubbock on Monday. And the Sorsby attorneys are asking for an injunction, and they're basing their case on the tenet of the NCAA. The first thing in their charter is to help student athletes and protect them, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's admirable, but this is a clear-cut case of an athlete betting not on pro games but college games, and that is against the rules, in black and white, also in their rules. So Sorsby is hoping to get a decision by the 15th of this month, because on the 22nd is the NBA supplemental draft that he has to get
NFL,
the paperwork in for. I just don't think he's ever going to play, and I hope he doesn't play. Not that I don't like the kid, but because I believe if they get an injunction and he plays, that injunction is not going to stay permanently, and if that's lifted, the Tech could have to forfeit all their wins this year.
I agree, John. And one of the things that we talked about last week, Coach K and Lee and I was shocked at what Lee said, was that as a Tech grad, I don't want him to play. I'm all for helping the kid out, keep his scholarship, let him get his education or whatever. but I don't want them to play for Tech because of exactly what you said. I think it's an ethics issue and they don't need to. But Lee said that the people in West Texas want.
If the NCAA loses this one, to me, they've got absolutely no credibility in any case that they got to go to court.
Exactly. And if they lose in this first court case, they're not going to give up. They're going to appeal.
Well, and
they're going to get it in front of a
Tommy
favorable judge
Tuberville
for
came
them.
up with his grandiose plan how we're going to save college football by, you get 5 years, you get one transfer. After that, you abide by the old rules where you got to sit out a year. Well, here's what's going to happen there. You get a kid who sat out a year, and let's say he's playing at Colorado State, and his NIL money is $150,000, and Purdue offers him $500,000. He's going to turn around and sue and say they're keeping me from making money I need, and he's probably going to win. And so, it is to the point where,
exactly.
I'm not so sure the NCAA even has a point to exist anymore.
They're toothless. They're toothless.
If they lose this, they'll lose all their teeth. They'll be gumming people. Well, I
was listening. I was going to say I was listening to actually Coach Sark, of all people, talking about the NIL. And it's probably 2 or 3 months ago. And I think all of this is it's all related, right? You've got Kalshi or whatever. All these betting markets. They're making millions of dollars. On March Madness, they're making millions of dollars on the playoff. You've got all these kids that are making millions of dollars through the NIL. And nobody is really looking out for the welfare of the kids.
That's what
coaches, all the
defense
teams,
is.
they're right. But that's what I'm saying. I think it's all going to boil down to what a judge in West Texas thinks. But at the end of the day, I think that's probably going to be the NCAA's actual defense here. Is it's like the players aren't, or the players have their own interests to look out for. The schools they just want to make sure they've got the best rosters. And it's so transaction. It is such a transaction. The NCAA, that's about the only thing they've got. That's about the only defense they have is like they're the only party here that actually, if it can claim to be neutral in any way, shape, or form. Now, this is also, we're in this situation because of years and years of the NCAA, making, deals here, or, pushing the envelope there. So it's, their hands aren't clean either. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's tournaments in Las Vegas. You watch any ball game and the FanDuel is on college sports. I mean, that's hypocrisy. But the thing is that the genie is out of the bottle with like Polymarket. You can bet on everything. And so if I'm a college pitcher,
right,
and I know that I can make $1,500 on if I throw a fastball instead of a curveball on the second pitch in the second inning, I mean, they'll never be able to put the cork in the bottle.
No. I'm curious about the actual what's going to happen to Cincinnati and to Indiana. Are they going to get in trouble? Is there going to be some punishment to them? They're the ones that actually were involved when
Cincinnati's looking really bad.
Tech did.
Yeah, Cincinnati's looking like the real sleazeball in this one.
I agree.
I think the only way they're ever actually going to be able to stop this is, and I hate saying it, is almost through criminal action, against players, when they find very obvious cases where players, are basically betting on themselves, right? Or betting on things that they can affect the outcome. And I think, I think it was I don't remember if it was Polymarket or if it was Kalshi, but, it was like November. It was right before the end of the college football season. It was the NCAA, came out hard against one of those markets for letting people bet on whether or not players would be entering the portal, right?
Exactly,
and,
right.
Think about that. You're a player, you have the ability to enter the portal. Let me go put, a $50,000 bet on whether or not I'm going to go enter the portal or not. Well,
right.
Guess what? If you squint and look at it, that could be considered fraud or market manipulation. And unless somebody's going to come down hard on it, there's no way to stop it.
Well, how can you possibly come down hard on this when if you look nationally, you've got these trades like we're going to bomb Iran on Tuesday. Well, and there's inside information and they know that they're going to bomb Iran on Tuesday. I mean, talk about the example being set.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's all
probably can place a bet right now on whether you think Sorsby's going to win the case or not. I mean,
oh yeah,
honestly,
I'm sure
you find out, that'd be well, and that's the thing with Sorsby. It's he bet what almost $100,000. I mean, at the end of the day, it's sad. He's got a gambling problem. And who's to say he hasn't bet on the outcome of his own criminal or his own, civil case here? And what's the parlay? Whether or not he's going to win, the first motion, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know what you do here.
Kevin, I'm with you. I think we're going to find Sorsby with a piano wire around his neck in an alley somewhere because this is only the tip of the iceberg. If he's losing $90,000 that we know about, how much is it that the black market, so to speak, is owed, and if the mob is owed $100,000,
no, they're going to want their money.
They're not going to stop.
They're going to want their money, but the feeling around Tech was the reason he turned himself in, so to speak, and said he needs help is to try to run for cover for other things. So, this is the tip of the iceberg, probably. And, we're going to probably find out an awful lot of things to come. But, we'll have to, just hang on and see. But either way, can anybody seriously picture Sorsby playing for Tech next year?
It's such a risk. It's such a risk. I understand you go through all that problem to try to land him. He's a good player, right? But
he'll be drafted number one. Do you really supplemental
want
draft?
The risk of
probably be the only one drafted in the supplemental draft?
Yeah.
But it's such a risk. Do you want to risk your season? If he's playing and it comes out that he was ineligible, God, what a nightmare that's going to be. You're coming off of a play.
Tech. Yeah,
you're coming off of a playoff appearance. Why would you want that hanging over you?
Coach, I wanted to ask you a question. What did you think about the Big 12 being the first conference that all the member teams have signed on
the agreement,
College Sports Commission agreement? What did you think about that?
Well, I think, somebody has to be the one to lead the way. And the Big 12, although it's somewhat looking at a little behind the Big 10 and the SEC right now, I don't know. I was impressed with it. And the fact is that they had all of the presidents or regents or chancellors, whatever you want to call them, agreeing coming out of that meeting that they were going to sign it within a week. It should have been signed, I think, by this Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That I think it's a good thing. It's a step in the right direction. They've got to do something. I mean, right now they're on a road to ruin. I really fear for college athletics right now because, like you've alluded to with the vetting and everything, there's so much. It's going to lead itself and lend itself to corruption. It's going to lend itself to players doing exactly what you were talking about. And so being, up front and say, yes, we endorse the idea of going back and reinstilling the old the rules, and again, it came out of the same thing. Where's academics playing into this nowadays?
No,
I mean,
nowhere.
Is a college supposed to educate, or are they supposed to proliferate their income? I mean, it's completely changed, and I applaud the Big 12. Somebody's got to take a step. Like Michael said a little while. So who's going to be first? You got to start somewhere. And I applaud them for being, being a leader and saying, yes, we agree. We're going to step forward, and all of our member schools are going to participate.
Tom, I have to give the Texas A&M coach props. Did you see what he, spoke about after that meeting, the SEC meeting? He said the problem is that nobody wants to give up anything. They all want to protect themselves without thinking of the overall, condition of the sport. And it's like a bunch of, dogs ripping at a steak.
Yeah, he's spot on. He's spot on
Yeah,
for
he is.
for what's going on. And everybody's greedy, everybody's selfish. It all comes down to the money, like we've talked about on virtually every episode. It's coming down to money. It's all about the money.
Let's talk about something that maybe is a little bit more enjoyable. Kevin, you hosted the Mike Leach show in Lubbock while you were there. Mike Leach has been nominated for the College Football Hall of Fame. They had to adjust their rules to get him in. But what do you think about Leach
because he
being
was only
nominated?
a couple of games from
candidate?
500. Then you have to win 60% of your games or something.
Yeah, he was just like a
it
percentage
was,
point underneath it,
and he was like
that.
596.
Yes. He certainly was a coach that has changed football forever.
Trendsetter, a true trendsetter.
A great innovator.
And the fact that he never played the game was even more amazing.
My take is go ahead and stick Mike
Kevin,
in there.
What was your thoughts on him?
Because what games he didn't win, he made up for by all the color he added to college football. Some of the things he said and did and that kind of stuff. But, I just don't see any problem whatsoever with him, being in there.
There's two other Tech coaches that are nominated, and I got to give some props to a coach that you guys probably aren't really familiar with because he was back in the 30s, Pete Cawthon. He is the all-time winningest coach at Texas Tech. And he basically was the Newt Rockne of West Texas. As a matter of fact, I think Rockne stole some of his stuff. They were the first team that traveled on via train and would go across country. And Rockne got that idea from Pete Cawthon. He won 76 games, and he was there, I think, for 11 seasons. And he had a winning percentage. I'm looking at my sheet here. I can't, of 69.693. So he was a heck of a coach. And another coach, personally, I think deserves to be in is Jim Carlin. He's on the ballot. And I believe that he was probably up there as the best coach that Tech has ever had. I know this, they had the best recruiting of any tenure when he was there. They weren't in the era of going out and buying players like people are today. But as far as Texas Tech was concerned, his staff was the first ones that were able to really get into Houston and South Texas and Dallas. And he did. I think the 1973 team that went 11-1 and beat Tennessee in the Gator Bowl is still up for discussion as the best team ever at Texas Tech. They had the best, I think, athletes up until this last year, and that's apples and oranges. He was actually going out and recruiting these kids, as freshmen, whereas last year they just went out and purchased a team, if you will. Right. So I think we're all agree. Coach, what do you think of Mike Leach?
I think he's a great innovator, justly deserving of the honor. I mean, like you said, his impact on the sport and college football and football kind of in general
yes,
is unmeasured. I mean, you can't measure it because the fact he's the kind of the godfather of the spread, hurry up. I mean, a lot of different things that he was considered the outlaw, I guess, in a way, and I agree with Kevin. He was always good for a quote. I mean, some of the things that he would he didn't mind saying just about anything. And he was a gunslinger.
The pirate. He was the pirate. You got to swing your sword.
Yeah, and the fact, it was entertaining. I loved watching them, the teams. I loved it when he was at OU helping them kind of get back on track.
Right.
Even though he was only there for a couple of years, but he was the guy that got them started back in the right direction.
Yeah, and had that quarterback for the national championship. Yes.
Yeah, and so the fact, I deservedly, it's an honor that's very much deserved. I mean, You can set all the criteria you want, but what's the real true impact of this individual on the sport? Because some people get, he got cut short. I mean, the fact, he would still be coaching probably.
Yep.
And he would have met the criteria, but unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to do it.
Right.
And so I'm totally supportive of him being inducted.
Well, I was just going to say on Coach Leach, if you think about it, in a lot of ways, we wouldn't be in a place where we are now, where you're able to get players come in to your school, for a year or two, drop into a system that you've designed and succeed in the way that you have. You've had systems forever, but if you think about it, that was probably really, Coach Leach's, biggest impact was being able to kind of design, not just a system, but almost like a factory where you could bring kids in, have them play for you for a year or two, go actually succeed with that, and then kind of keep going forward. It's hard to think of another coach, who's really been able to do that. That wasn't, that was more about sort of building sort of that factory approach and not just sort of designing a system or having sort of their way of coaching, but really kind of building an entire ecosystem around the idea of having, kids come in, for a season or two. Now, of course, your eligibility rules and all of the stuff were different, but, I don't think you would have sort of the NIL or sort of the portal, the transfer portal, the way that it is today, if you didn't have Mike Leach back there in the, 2000s building out, sort of the forerunner for all of it.
I think what he did and what he proved is that he had developed a system that could overcome the advantages that the blue blood programs had. I mean, the teams that had all the linemen, he developed a system to work around that. The teams that had the great defenses, he developed a system that could work around that. One of the things that I remember vividly is that line split.
They were huge,
huge splits
that he developed. It was just
4 or 5 yards.
Like you said, Coach, he was really an innovator. So, guys, let's go ahead and wrap this up with Scattershooting. Michael, I don't know if you've seen episodes, but we'll start with Kevin, and you'll get the hang of it.
It's going to be
Kevin,
the
what's your
legal,
Scattershooting
I
moment
guess you would
this
say
week?
battle at Texas Tech, because if the NCAA loses this one, they are going to be the most insignificant joke in all of sports. And so, I'm anxious to see how that plays out.
Tom, what about you? What are you thinking about this week?
Well, I'm going to go to the NFL and to SMU and talk about the famous Raymond Berry, who passed away this week, a fine Hall of Fame football player for the Baltimore Colts, who also led the New England Patriots as a head coach in the 1980s. Took them all the way to the Super Bowl. I think it was the Super Bowl that the Patriots lost to that famous Bears team, got embarrassed by that Bears team. But Raymond Berry was a tremendous individual and did a lot for the sport of football, won a couple of world championships with the Baltimore Colts. I find it intriguing that his number is retired by SMU and by the Indianapolis Colts, but he's also in the Baltimore Ravens Ring of Honor, and he never had anything to do with the Baltimore Ravens. I think it's more about what he did for the city of Baltimore.
Yes. Well, he was involved in that late 50s game that they call the best game ever played. And everybody probably in your mind that's seen that picture of Alan Amici scoring the touchdown. Well, it was Raymond Berry who got him there. He had like 178 yards receiving in that game, which back then was unheard of. So he was the one that put him in that situation.
Got him down to the 3-yard line.
Yeah, that Amici scored from.
Exactly.
Coach, what's your Scattershooting moment this week?
Kind of doing some reading today, I can't believe what's coming out of Austin right now. Coach Sarkisian, he just can't seem to leave other people alone. Picked on Ole Miss. Only thing you need to graduate from Ole Miss, just take basket weaving. Ridiculing the program, and then he turned around this week and went after Texas Tech and said, we could play with Texas Tech's schedule this year. We could play our 2s and 3s and go undefeated and qualify for the playoffs. And I love it because Coach McGuire called his bluff. He said, we've already arranged to buy out our first two opponents, and we'll meet you, because we've contacted Jerry Jones, we'll meet you at AT&T Stadium and see whether your twos or threes could go undefeated this year. So you got to be careful. I mean, I said it before, you got to have a little bit of bravado, but you got to temper it with some common sense.
And some of that, to me, is more for your own locker room, not for general consumption. Maybe you fire up your team and say, hey guys, we can go out there and we can play our twos and threes and win on their schedule, but you don't come out and say it to the national media.
Well, I think some of that is coming because last year I think they were ranked number 1 and they didn't even get in the playoffs. He's feeling a little heat.
Yeah.
Michael, you're over there where the heat is. What's your scatter shooting moment?
Man, I think for me this week, I think it's going to have to be to see how Wemby does in his first NBA finals. I think I was reading somewhere, I think his player card is he's 7'4", but somehow he feels like he's about 10 feet tall, and I'm real curious to see what the New York media in particular makes of Wemby when he shows up in Madison Square Garden. I don't know. It's gonna, I'm not the biggest Spurs fan, but there's just something about watching him, and he deserves that nickname, the Alien. So I think it's going to be an interesting finals for sure.
Well, I tell you what, I've never seen a guy that's 7'4", 7'5" that can run like a guard and shoot like a guard. So he is an incredible talent. Guys, I'll just wrap this up. Tom reminded me of one thing that I did want to say something about. Want to notice the passing of Bob Horner. Bob was a player that I followed during his college career at Arizona State. And then, in those early days of cable, in the Atlanta Braves being on WTBS, he was chosen first by Ted Turner and helped turn that program around with Dale Murphy and got him into the playoffs. I was lucky enough to meet him and his wife in Lubbock for the College Baseball Hall of Fame ceremony. He was inducted in our first class in 2006, and I was really sorry. I think he died much too soon. And, that was my association with Bob Horner. But I also wanted to talk about Pat Murphy, the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers. He came through town in Houston this past weekend. Pat was the coach at Arizona State. I met him the first time when he was coaching Notre Dame before he went out to Tempe. And what a great guy he is. He's hot-tempered, but he helped us tremendously with the Hall of Fame. And behind the scenes, what he also accomplished is that there were two, probably still are somewhat, but there were two parties of fans out at Arizona State, one being big supporters of Coach Bobby Winkels, who built that program, and then the followers of Jim Brock, as we mentioned, that also had a tremendous run at Arizona State. And what Pat helped us do is reunite into one solid fan base at Arizona State and get both of the coaches in our Hall of Fame. And I really think that Pat was the impetus behind that, getting Mrs. Brock and Coach Winkels together and ironing all those problems out. It was two strong personalities and egos, and that always happens. But one couldn't have happened without the other. So that was my scatter shooting for this week. Guys, thank you so much for all your input. We'll be back with episode 16 next week. Everybody have a good week, and boy, we'll have a lot of stuff to watch over the weekends. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Sportz-USA, available at our website at sportz-USA.com. And remember to click and favorite so you can join us next time on Sportz-USA.com.